herself out with a women's college. She writes about the gendered culture of military institutions, and I think the best description I can give of her book, Every Girl, is the blurb I wrote for it last year, in which I said, how can I believe Adam, this is a quote from one of the poems, how can I believe Adam came first when the flower precedes the fruit? Angela Dribben writes in Every Girl. Coming of age in a Virginia of hunting dogs, pickups, and hog farms, these poems, evocative in their details of men smelling like labor, food such as gelatinous ham, military school life for young women, menstruation, rape, and including occasional photographs, bluntly acknowledge the destructive impact of male prerogative when social class and rural life leave few ways out. Usha Akella, in contrast, is an Indian American who writes about a different form of marginalization, that of patriarchy and the commodification of women in marriage and motherhood, in particularly in I Will Not Bear You Sons. John Guzlowski emigrated to the US as a displaced person after World War II, along with his sister and his parents, who met in and barely survived a Nazi slave camp in Europe. This early experience of his and the experience of his parents inform a lot of his work, in particular that in his books, Lightning and Ashes and Echoes of Tattered Tongues, which are poems of dislocation and trauma. So we'll do the reading in the order I referred to the poets, and before each one, I'll give a more formal biography, starting with Angela Dribben, and this it'll be in the chat as well. Angela Dribben's debut collection, Every Girl, a finalist for the 2020 Dogfish Head Prize, was published by Main Street Rag in May 2021. She is contributing review editor at Cider Press Review and director of internal affairs at Southern Collective Experience. Her poetry, essays, mixed media, and reviews can be found or are forthcoming in Cave Wall, Echo Theo, Deep South, San Pedro River Review, Crab Creek Review, Up the Staircase Quarterly, and others. Please welcome Angela Dribben.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you to the Hudson Valley Writers Center for having me tonight. I'm beyond honored to be reading with Usha and John. I did attend a military school that was predominantly male. I am following a family tradition that the oldest went to military school. And then I spent some time in the Air Force, and those are the poems I'll be reading from tonight. And I'll start with myself in the military school. Girl in a school full of boys, period. This is where I learned to wound like a woman, to catch the blood and hide it away. Bury its shame in bleached, chlorinated rayon. Cloak its dog-calling guilt, its areola spreading, labia swelling, hips swaying, a curse, a spell, a beckoning the boys in. This is where I first learned to hold power alongside shame. How to smile like I can't hear the whispers when I bleed through my uniform. In formation in the mess hall. Smile like I don't know how they will break me if they catch me. Run just before they do. This is where I learned not to leave the applicator in. Its length triggers a gag reflex. Its plastic points pinch. Its pinkness serves only as a reminder of the small girl still inside, meant to be discarded. To bleed with purpose, capture life deep in my pelvis. To hold a boy firmly within for a reason, for the family my scarred uterus will fail to create. Bleed as a woman, smell of iron, of wound. To tear open a scab like clockwork. Set your watch by. marking of time, and possibility passing. Because of being at Hargrave, I have a fascination with the Citadel, and it's also where my grandfather went and where he had planned for me to go. But thank goodness they did not take females then, because as you'll know by my poems, I was not cut out for this life. And so one of the things I was fascinated by was when females were let in and what their experience was like, from the first female to the first female graduate to the first female regimental commander. And this poem is for the judge who ended the Citadel's 152-year tradition of a male-only policy. Dear C. Weston Houck, I would like to write and say thank you for believing women are equal. Truth is, I am suspicious of stellar running backs and scoutmasters. Truth is, I am suspicious of men, especially those elevated and robed, men seated in the highest chair in the room, throne, men making decisions for women. She wants the full cadet experience, the Citadel stomped. Shave her head. The full cadet experience, like sleeping in the infirmary with a horn and case. Being 1 in 2,000 turns out to be a murder weapon. What are we saying when we say a woman needs a latch to be safe from men? After ensuring Faulkner had privacy to bathe, undress, and use the restroom, Houck said he believed he should largely leave to the Citadel the management of her arrival. She doesn't have a phone, a beeper. I'm not sure she even has a friend, you said. You knew she did not have a friend. You did your job, just that, only that, and then you threw your hands up. You had done enough to earn your headlines and your praise. The New York Times makes sure we say your name, right? And over, even after your death. It's pronounced Houck, meaning to dig, to hollow out, to excavate. You get more than your fair share. Houck ended 152 years of Citadel tradition. But you didn't. You did your job. Shannon Faulkner fought, her parents, her lawyer, ACLU, cadets who found a way to see beyond their maleness, a corps who eventually found their way to kneel and be led by a female. You did enough to sit at the head of your dinner table opposite your wife and sip at your Manhattan, to look at your daughter, Charlotte Elizabeth, in the eye and pretend you'd done right by her. This next poem is to Sarah Zorn, who was the first female regimental commander in 175 years of Citadel tradition. Dear Sarah Zorn, did you know your name means Lady Princess, Princess of the multitudes? Top cadet, you took the gilt-handled sword for us all. A freshman, you must know her, since y'all, meaning female, only make up 9% of undergrads, says now she knows she can. Now I know I could have, and I grieve that failure or ignorance or loss. I read your mother, an Air Force veteran, instilled a love for country in you. When she passed, your aunts took you in. First week on campus, your aunt died. You were back in 30 hours. I would have understood if you hadn't returned, but not the women who raised you, not the women they raised. Did they help you with your military math? Yours so much better than mine. Is that what happens when a woman teaches a girl math? 70 push-ups in under 2 minutes, 3 black belts and 3 karate disciplines, first female regimental commander. Did your aunt say something to you right before she left her body? Some secret I never knew? How to hold the long gray line, to call the young men brother, the core family? Did you wish they'd been there when you took command? Not to watch, but to gently brush your hair back, weave it safely into a French braid, careful so that no wisp could escape. And I find that gender is in all of my work. It is in all of my work. Equity is in all of my work. And I find one of the most disconcerting things sometimes to be that as far as gender goes, it's not always just men who don't see me or another woman, another female. And so this one is written to Nancy Mace. She's the first female to graduate the Citadel. And there was an occasion where Shannon Faulkner, who was the first female to attend the Citadel, the one who led the court case to overturn the all-male policy, where she referred to herself as an alum. Dear Nancy Mace, congratulations on being the first female graduate of the Citadel. I heard you didn't think much of it when Shannon Faulkner said she was an alum. But what I heard her say was survivor. Sexist epithets spray painted on her parents' home. Federal Marshal escort to campus on her first day as cadet in 1995. She said warrior. 2.5 years in court to break 152 years in tradition, transforming young boys to men. Die Shannon on the Citadel water tower. Bumper stickers and t-shirts sold. 1,952 bulldogs and 1 bitch. Save the males. She said she knew when it was time to leave, only 1 week after she started, overcome by stress and mess hall beefaroni. She means she has made peace with why she endured alone. It was for you. And so I did spend a brief time in the Air Force. And I ended up getting out on a entry-level separation. And this is what this poem is about. Like it never happened. Beside the 2-screen movie theater in the strip mall, the Air Force recruiter catches me. Halfway down the hall, hungover, nothing better to do today. Should have kept walking to the Marines. They'd have taught me what it meant. Semper Fidelis, always faithful to uniform, unit, corps. My recruiter says there are no guaranteed jobs. Liar. Like a creepy boyfriend he calls every day, 3 times a day until I get on the bus. 6 weeks of ease goes by fast, knowing where my next meal's coming from, knowing where I am going to sleep. Then my orders come. I am to spend the next 4 years killing ants around trees in an officer's yard. Scott Air Force Base, Belleville, Illinois. Barely more than a Taco Bell. I'm afraid of small, dark spaces when I don't know a way out. I show up for duty in tie-dyes and no shoes, quit shaving my armpits, 21. Within a month, I leave. Take a job in St. Louis, canvassing with a nonprofit, spend winter evenings knocking on strangers' doors, collecting checks and signatures, handing them my clipboard to distract them while I strain to see past their shoulders, looking for how to get what they have. A warm, orange glow, bookshelves filled with spines, real leather couches with throw pillows trimmed in chenille, sounds of supper coming from beyond the foyer. The day of my 6-month anniversary in the United States Air Force, I get the call. They'll let me stay gone. AWOL, entry-level separation, failure to conform. No stockade time, just considered never having served. Wedged in a place of non-existence, never in and can never go back. And I think I have time for one more. This one is, there's a movie about Megan Levy. She was a United States Marine Corps corporal who served as an MP K-9 handler. She was awarded the Purple Heart, and the movie came out in 2017. And I was so moved when I saw it, because it's so easy for us to get lost in life. And when I saw it, I saw myself, and I saw myself back when I was in the Air Force and back when I was having that experience. And dear Megan Levy, I didn't do a damn thing worth nothing while I was in the service. I killed ants living outside. Only thing they ever did wrong was try to thrive in an officer's backyard. I couldn't ever shake the feeling that me killing them wasn't that far removed from someone killing me. I'm always somewhere I shouldn't be or don't belong. My flight commander at tech school called me in, asked me why I had a chip on my shoulder. I told him, look at my file and he'd see. He offered me the medical squadron. Nah, I'm almost out of here. But you took that opportunity with the dogs. I wish I had done that. I envied you at first, was even mad. Like I wanted to call bullshit on all you did. Wanted to say, well, I didn't get your chance. I would have done something with dogs too, but I wouldn't have. I couldn't believe it when you walked out on your dog, but I walked out a lot on people. In the movie, one of your bosses said you didn't connect well with others. Me either. But when I put my beagle down, I called in sick to work, stayed in bed for 3 days. My daddy said, I hope you're this upset when I die. I told him, if you're as much a part of my life as my dog was, I will be. You get what I'm saying. Your daddy worked a lot too. Before I joined up, I slept at my daddy's sometimes. On top of the watchtower. When the wind blew too hard to climb, I stayed in my faded red Chevette at the bottom. I looked you up on Twitter, thought you're probably doing something great. Figured you'd have 12,000 followers, 1,876 likes for every post. Turns out you're just regular living. You have the obligatory likes, friends and family, no followers. And I don't get it. You're a war hero. You're on talk shows, news shows, wrote letters to a senator, walked the front line. In the movie, you were quoted saying, you don't leave because you have somewhere to go. You leave because there's nothing keeping you there. Seems like you and me aren't that different. So. Thank y'all very much for having me tonight and holding space for these poems and the women they're written for. Thank you.
That was truly wonderful, Angela. And you touched a lot. There's a lot of reactions to your poems in the chat. There's a lot of comments there for you to look at. I think you're writing about an experience that many of the people in the audience here tonight have not had, and it's written in such a compelling and gorgeous way. So thank you. Our next reader is Usha Akella. She has authored 4 books of poetry, 1 chapbook, and scripted scripted and produced 2 musical dramas. She earned a Master's of Studies, MST, in creative writing from the University of Cambridge in the UK. And she is the founder of Matwala, www.matwaala.com, and hosts www.the-pov.com, an interview and conversations website. She's also the founder of the Poetry Caravan in New York and Austin. Please welcome Usha Akella.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Susanna, Jennifer, Margot, and the entire team at the Hudson Valley for this invitation. It's just so wonderful to be back. And I'm very honored to be with you, Angela and John, tonight. So while ruminating about the theme for today's reading, I remembered the world's longest epic poem, the Mahabharata, written in 100,000 couplets. It chronicles a contentious relationship between cousins and a dispute for the throne, culminating in a gory battle to reinstate dharma, or the cosmic law establishing order. So from long, long ago in human consciousness, there seems to be an accepted paradox that wars have been a necessary step to establish a greater correct peace, a paradox that's used, misused, and misinterpreted. We know war on this planet, wars between nations, ethnicities, and race, civil wars within each country, wars between self and society, wars between genders, wars on a woman's body, wars that demand children as a prize, wars on the environment, and wars within as a self-actualization process. It seems we are in a continuous corrective mode from the microscopic to the cosmic. Perhaps we'll never know a utopia of universal peace, but we must believe in it if we are to continue as a human race. So this evening, I've picked poems that I feel reflect this complicated theme in some sense or the other. And I'd like to begin with a poem called Jerusalem. Jerusalem, shall I dare say your tales with this foreign tongue as I spin like a top in your street? Shall I enter your gates as you lie under the fingertips of a golden menorah? What badge shall I show your armed men keeping peace? When I listen to a mother calling for her children in fields of invisible ears and tongueless tongues, and old walls tremble with secrets, flags, and burdens, and time the deathless watchman prowls your streets? When the mint in your tea refreshes my tongue and bread fills my stomach, and I walk the walk of Via Dolorosa on the palm of the city, pointing different directions with more than one minotaur at its center. When I climb Mount Olives and see dead men waiting like chocolates in boxes to be opened, when I see the patience and the impatience of waiting, and prophets' names too many to remember cast shadows on your streets, shall I ask for permission to enter? Shall I dare stand by a wall, join lines of people in eternal mourning, yearning? Shall I join my grief to theirs and ask for temples to be built? Idol of idols, how shall I gain entry? You, the navel of this earth, where people rooted to salt, faith, loyalty, 3 times over like 3 rivers flowing separately between your messianic apocalyptic banks. What message can I bring as balm for your wounds? All messages are known to you. They are coded in your stones and the cursive of prophets. City of walls, stones, earth, restoration, air, light, sky, blood, hope, tears, wail, lament. City of streets wagging many languages, where past, present, future coexist as solemn triplets. Shall I dare change the cartography of religion, stand under the golden dome, and let fly a new litany, longing to be rewritten? This poem is called Botero's Doves, and I wrote this when I visited the city of Medellin, and there was a monument of peace sculpted by Botero for the city of Medellin, and it was this beautiful dove, a huge dove, many feet high, and it was bombed. So he recast it and he remade it, and they have both the doves side by side, one with its inside completely scalloped out, and the other whole. And so the poem is called Botero's Doves. Can there be a dove of peace and a dove of war? Can a country stick out two tongues? Its wounds bloom like roses or explode as rifle fire? Can there be two dawns? A dawn of the sun, a dawn of the night? Humans, we have two hearts, one black and one white, but to see it so exposed. I'm going to go to I Will Not Bear You Sons, and I'm going to read a poem that I actually haven't read before, and it's called In the Yajna of My Dreams. Let's see. Okay, here it is. And this poem is in Draupadi's voice, and she was the heroine and the catalyst of the Mahabharat war that I mentioned. She was a pawn in men's hands, and eventually her own powerful rage ushered in the end of an era for renewal. Strike, my heart calls. Exile me from this kingdom of hatred to the order of the unknown. Bred to start a war, instead show me a destiny of love's maze of marigolds. A new melody sizzles in my bones, separate from my father's anthem of revenge. In this Sabha, people like pausing clouds before rain. By my side, my father, revenge souring his breath, waiting for the strike of the arrow to its mark. First step to his mission, this irony of ironies, my Swayamvaram, self-chosen, my destiny was drafted a long time ago. I stepped out of a fire fully sculpted by my father's slithering rage. It is not the rainbow arch of the bow or the marriage of your pupil with the pupil of the fish. It is the rippling arrow of your arm, the tree trunk of your back, the tanned curve of your cheek that sends a shiver through me. I curl like a vine tendril, wanting to fit in your curves, be claimed. When you drew your arm back, all of time drew back, and I vaulted to the source of my being and found a new reason to be. When your muscled arm pointed upward, it slashed me like a sword. You stepped forward. You stepped forward, time condensed. Your thighs hazel sheen in the thin muslin. My breath taut as a snake about to strike. A possible world of intimacy parted my lungs inadvertently. The smell of my jasmine garland exploded in my body. You pulled the string. You pulled the string. I vaulted to the sky for the last time. How innocent I was. How was I to know love's archway loomed in the architecture of revenge? Someone was pulling us all that day on the strings from a greater bow, from a greater bow. I walked into the future, my unbound tresses smeared with blood, a black wind blowing in the land for eternity. I'm going to read another poem called Unsought Pickings, and this is again from I Will Not Bear You Sons. This poem is dedicated to the African women, slave women, who were subjected to forced breeding. The years between us are bald gossypium, clawed realities spinning yarns, chilling truth, not yarn. Mandeville knew this was a beast sprouting plant, our kutin, your cotton, their currency of carnage. I am told her pain is not yours to articulate, share, or voice. Still, I seek her in the blurred spirals of the feminine self, my hand seeking her palm as a mirror. Perhaps she imagines snowflakes to pick, snowflakes, the white gold falling from the sky in the north. Instead, her fingers stabbed cotton like wasps. The destiny of her people hewed her body to a sickle, seeking earth's arms more than sky. Did she think I'll be picking cotton till the sun is a hole in the lemon-soaked sky of waning blues? Perhaps. Did she seek answers in the liminal spaces of unsought pickings, blooming like soft cotton? Better the cotton picking than the wedding between the cows and the bulls, than the decree from dank walls, than the brooding air of muffled suffering, than the damp, wet cave of smothered pain, than fingers and pubescence prying her open like a can, than the unwilling rabbit of her private to his, better numbing labor than the pinioning of air pressing as a bale of hay, the straw filling her mouth, throat, lungs, her eyes sweeping the air like bats. Outside the sullen crushed sympathy, like lifeless cotton with hardened seeds, ears dialed to deafness for survival. Better her hands furrowed and perforated, better her palms fissured with ancestral pain. Did the moments of anger pile on stone by stone to sift between unsought pickings? Be a breeding woman than be fettered to a whipping post? This better than a back striped like a field, red petals of welts blooming to the sun, a waste of dandelions around her drooping in shame, staining her memory's notebook of incoherent rage, a rage alive, breathing like cotton. So the quotation I have there about the wedding between the cows and the bulls was actually a quotation by a slave woman when she was asked this question of what it was like. And that was her response, that it was like a wedding between the bulls and the cows, that they were not even treated as human beings. So how much time do I have, Susanna? Do I have time for one or two more?
I guess yes, you have about 5 minutes.
Okay, that's great. Let's see. I'll end with two poems. This one is called Umbrellas, and this was inspired by my visit to the Medellin Poetry Festival. And on the last day of the festival, there were about 5,000 people in the audience, and it began to rain, and nobody moved. They just opened up these umbrellas and sat there through the reading. And the poem is called Umbrellas. This poet, what is he saying? His words so sure like granite. I understand nothing except that a poet speaks poetry, and I am listening hard. When he turns a page, it could be another page from his life chosen to be sacrificed. His hand moves on the page, moves like a scorpion full of ink, like a bird scattering seeds. It seems like a city in which you find love young before death finds you on the street. Someone or something seeks someone or something first. In the audience, there is a girl showing off her young cleavage and pink painted lips. Flamingos are born from them and stride in the audience. A poet speaks of her love for Beirut. The translator holds two versions, like two neighborhoods in a city. Young faces like torches lit up. Celebrate the young ones here. Send death packing with his many faces. Let the alphabet of faces speak a new script. River of poets, river of images. There is no bank, no shore, no end. A couple under the umbrella. She rests her head on his shoulder. Sometimes a shoulder is a wall. Does she know this? Shall the poet lean on the wall of the world for comfort? A mother cuddles her daughter. They are garlanded with poetry this evening. The Lebanese poet says, "Today my life is mine." A child creeps from poet to poet on the stage, his face a round moon bobbing on clouds. The rain comes down savagely. Umbrellas open like sunflowers in the dark. The dark is like a silent bat. Torch fires vanish like dreams into the unconscious. The people stay under the umbrellas. The people come, keep coming from the stairs, from the earth, from the sky, as if they are beamed down. The rain pours, the people do not move. You are the poems, says one poet. They go wild. The rain brings a river from the sky, and a river of people, and a river of poets, and a river of faces. And poetry does not die this evening, as love does not die in hate, as peace does not die in war. And I will end with a poem called Bridges. Unbridge the latitudes that arise from hate. Erase the deep groove longitudes of an old earth. We are here, we do not come to stay. The earth is round to some, flat to some. Some come to do, some to undo. Some bridges are breaking from too much load. Let our steps be the flight of doves. Let our roads be incense. You and I are guests. This planet belongs to children. Where are the dinosaurs that lauded the earth? The builder of the pyramids, temples, and hanging gardens? What if I told you this earth is one bolt in a bridge whose masonry we cannot fathom? Have we not felt the unseen caissons holding this universe? The original destiny of the continents was a handshake. We come adrift in error and end in sky, earth, or water. Let us, like the Warkasi, grow bridges organically, root in earth, thwart gravity, rise majestically from heart to heart. Let us offer our children our wisdom, not our greed. Let us ask today, tomorrow, and every day, have I thawed at least one hard sinew in my heart? Am I lighter when I reach the other side? Thank you.
Wow. I'm so glad to have been introduced to your work, Usha. That phrase, as peace does not die in war, is something that I think I will keep with me for a long time for, to make me feel a little better about the state of the world. I like the way both readers so far, and in fact, all three readers address in different ways inequity and power. Our third reader is John Guzlowski. His Echoes of Tattered Tongues, which I mentioned earlier, won the 2017 Ben Franklin Award for Poetry and the Eric Hoffman Montaigne Award for Most Thought-Provoking Work of 2017. He has published work in poetry, prose, literary criticism, reviews, fiction, and nonfiction. His poems and stories have appeared in national journals, including North American Review, Ontario Review, Chattahoochee Review, Atlanta Review, Nimrod, Crab Orchard Review, and Marge. Others of his books include Language of Mules from DP Press, a Polish book from Biblioteka Śląska, Third Winter of War Buchenwald from Finishing Line Press, Suitcase Charlie, and Little Altar Boy both from Casva Press, and True Confessions, 1965 to now, from Dark Horse Press. Road of Bones, his novel about two German lovers separated by war, is forthcoming from Cervena Barva Press. He is a professor emeritus of English literature at Eastern Illinois University. Please welcome John Guzlowski.
I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having me. I'm going to read poems about my parents and their experiences in the slave labor camps in Germany. The Germans needed slave labor during the war because all of the German men were out trying to conquer the world. So there was no one in Germany who could do work. So what the Germans did is went to one country after another is picked up these work camps, slave labor camps in Germany. And by the end of the war, there were about 15 million
Don, I don't know if you
people
could hear this, but we're having trouble hearing you. You're breaking up a little bit.
labor camps. After the war, my parents couldn't go back to Poland, and so they stayed in a
Hey,
a
John?
refugee camp in Germany for 6 years.
Dawn, I think if you turn off your video, maybe?
Some country.
John, can you hear us? Yeah, that's good.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do about that. Um, I'll try. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
John, can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. But now no one will see me. Can you hear? Can you hear me? Hello? No,
Yeah,
can't hear me.
maybe.
Um,
It seems like it might be better. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what to do. Can I try to read a poem?
Yeah, I think you're okay now.
Okay. 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 Uh, the first poem is about the day my mother was taken to the slave labor camps. The poem's called "My Mother Was 19." Soldiers from nowhere came to my mother's farm, killed her sister's baby with their heels, shot my grandmother too. One time in the neck, then for kicks in the face lots of times. They saw my mother. They didn't care she was a virgin, dressed in a blue dress with tiny white flowers. They raped her so she couldn't stand up, couldn't lie down, couldn't talk. They broke her teeth when they shoved the dress in her mouth. If they had had a camera, they would have taken her picture and sent it to her. That's the kind of men they were. Here's what my mother said about this years later. She said, "Let me tell you, God doesn't give you any favors. He doesn't say, now you've seen this bad thing, but tomorrow you'll see some good thing, and then you'll be smiling. That's bullshit." Uh, when my mother was put on the train to be taken to Germany, she cried and she cried, and this surprised me because my mother was not a very emotional person. I never saw her cry, and so when she told me this story, uh, I decided it should be a poem. The poem's called "Grief." My mother cried for a week, first in the boxcars and then in the camps. Her friends said, "Tekla, don't cry. The Germans will shoot you and leave you in the field." But my mother couldn't stop. Even when she had no more tears, she cried the way a dog will gulp for air when it's choking on a stick or some bone it's dug up in the ground and swallowed. The woman in charge gave her a cold look and knocked her down with her fist like a man, and then told her if she didn't stop crying, she would call the guards to stop her crying. But my mother couldn't stop. The howling was something loose in her, nothing could stop. The next poem is called "Life Story." A lot of these girls who were taken to the camps they were young girls in their late teens, early 20s. Some of them were pregnant when they were taken to the camps, and some of them gave birth to their babies in the camps. And the Germans had no use for babies in the camps, in the slave labor camps. You can't make a baby work. This is a story called Life Story. And it's a story my mother told me about something that happened. Life story. She was born in a concentration camp in 1944. She weighed 1 pound, 8 ounces. She was a leaf of grass. She was lovely. She was born dreaming her mother's dream of flying like a robin through the sky and eating everything that was pure and good and golden. And then the women guards smashed her into the wall and wrapped her in newspaper and threw her into the garbage with the others. The war really shook my mother's faith in everything. She didn't believe in politicians. She didn't believe in God. She didn't believe in my father. She didn't believe in anything. And this is a poem called What the War Taught My Mother. My mother learned that sex is bad. Men are worthless. It is always cold, and there is never enough to eat. She learned that if you are stupid with your hands, you will not survive the winter, even if you survive the fall. She learned only the young survive the camps. The old people are left in piles like worthless paper, and babies are scarce like chickens and bread. My mother learned that the world is a broken place where no birds sing, and even angels cannot bear the sorrows God gives them. She learned that you don't pray your enemies will not torment you. You only pray that they will not kill you. I'm going to read some poems about my dad. My dad was captured in 1940 and sent to Buchenwald concentration camp in Germany as a slave laborer. When he was finally liberated by the Americans, he weighed 70 pounds. My mother used to say that he looked like two shoelaces tied together when she first saw him. I asked my father how he was able to survive in Buchenwald on the kind of food they were given there. They were only given about 600 calories of food a day. And this poem is based on what my father told me. It's called What My Father Ate. My father ate what he couldn't eat, what his mother taught him not to. Brown grass, small chips of wood, the dirt beneath his gray fingernails. He ate the leaves off trees. He ate bark. He ate the flies that tormented the mules working in the fields. He ate what would kill a man in the normal course of his life. Leather buttons, cloth caps, anything small enough to get into his mouth. He ate roots. He ate newspaper. In his slow, clumsy hunger, my father did what the birds did. He picked for oats or corn or any kind of seed left in the dried shit by the cows. And when there was nothing to eat, he would search the ground for pebbles and they would loosen his saliva, and he would swallow that. And all of the other men did the same. Um, I've got a couple more poems. This one is called What My Father Knows About Killing. Uh, my father saw many of his friends die in the camps, and this is a poem about that. What my father knows about killing. My father knew men and animals did not die the same way. A man would kill a horse or a cow or a pig with respect he would never show another man. Killing a pig, a man would steady it, prepare it for the single killing blow, work to make its suffering quick, if not instant. A poised hammer ready to strike down in such a way that the pig would not see it or hear it, would hardly feel it on the back of its head in that one sure spot that would end it before it knew it. My father knew that that wasn't the way men killed each other. He had seen his friends crucified and hung, castrated and frozen to death, women raped and beaten and shot, their breasts torn apart by bayonets, their babies thrown and scattered into the air like sand. My father said that suffering was the sauce we reserve for men and women. This is the last poem. It's a prose piece. It's about how my mom and dad met uh, toward the end of the war, just before liberation. And it's told in my father's voice. The poem is called "My Father Tells Me How He Met My Mother." We came upon a small slave camp in the woods. 3 or 4 buildings, a fence of barbed wire, a closed gate. Some of us on that death march were dying, and we fell to our knees right there. Others kept walking and stumbling toward that gate. There was no one around, no German guards, no soldiers. They must have run away because they thought the war was finished and the Americans were near. There were no prisoners either that we could see in the barracks beyond the wall. My phone's ringing, excuse me. Just a minute. Somebody's got to pick it up someplace else. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. There were no prisoners either that we could see in the barracks beyond the fence. We thought that maybe the ones who had been there had been taken like us on a death march. It was so quiet. One of the men with me, a Frenchman, stepped up to the gate and shouted, "Hello." That's all he said. He said it in German first and then in French, but no one answered. It sounded funny in French. Bonjour, bonjour. An army truck stood in front of one of the barracks buildings, and I thought I saw some movement there. Even with my one good eye, I could see it. Someone moving near the back of a truck. I pointed this out to the Frenchman, and he saw it too. And we both shouted then, him in German, him in French, and me in Polish. I shouted, "Dzień dobry, dzień dobry." I felt foolish saying that. Good day, good day. There had not been a good day for a long time. A woman then came out of the barracks. Like us, she was dressed in rags, striped rags. She stumbled to the gate and stopped there. She looked at us, and we looked at her. No one said anything for a while. I could see she was weak. She held the gate so tightly with her hand so she wouldn't fall. I couldn't speak. I had not seen a woman for months and had not talked to one for years. The Germans would kill you for talking to a woman. Then she spoke in Polish. Slowly, she said, "Co teraz? What now?" I didn't know what to say. My tongue was like a rock in my mouth. She said it again, "What now?" And I still didn't know what to say, or what would happen, or if the world would end that day or not. I was hungry and spent, and I didn't know anything. I looked at her and felt so weak, felt like I was going to fall and join my brothers dying behind me. And your mother pulled the gate open and she said, "Please come in." And I did. Thank you.
John, the work is, now let me get my video back on. We'll get it. I'm so glad we were able to hear you. I'm sorry we couldn't see you. The poems are so powerful and overwhelming. And as someone said in one of the comments, and it's true, you feel like you're right there when listening to the words. I want to thank all three of you, and I want to now turn it back over to Jennifer to open it up for questions, as we generally do at the end of the reading. Jenny.
Thank you so much, Susanna. Thank you to our three readers. Whoops. Do you hear an echo?
Yes.
Okay, let's mute everyone else. Maybe that will help. Yeah, this was really powerful, a powerful night. And like Margot said in the chat, what powerful poems of witness. And we have, I don't even know if we have questions yet in the chat, because we have been just so wrapped hearing all of your words. But what we're going to do is spotlight all of the poets for everyone and put you all here with us in front so we can see all the poets together, and we'll try to have a little conversation, and hopefully we can maybe see John again too. We'll try that at first to see if we can put him in the, have the video on for him. One thing I recently, because of Zoom, I went to a tour at Auschwitz, of the Auschwitz Museum. You can do that now during the pandemic. And the guide had been raised there, and his whole life, he was in his late 40s. And he talked about how when he was young, he didn't understand when people said that they had about 300 or 600 calories a day to eat. And that poem that John read tonight made me think about that tour, where he then showed photographs of the people who were released and rescued from the camps, and what that looked like on their body, their skin and bones, what 300 to 600 calories was. So I thought that John's poem about eating the flies and eating the pebbles and eating the dirt really brought that home, and almost as well as the photographs that we see now from the camps. It must have been so painful, John, to hear these stories recounted from your mother and your father. Do you think you can put on your camera, or do you want to just answer without putting on the camera? Yeah, that might not work.
Let me see if I can turn the camera on. Can you hear me? How's that? Good, bad? I'll turn the camera off. My father started telling, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. My father started telling me these stories when I was about 5 or 6 years old. He would sit down at the table. The first story I remember him telling me is about a women having their breasts cut off by the guards who just, who just do this terrible thing. And my father couldn't stop himself. He was just a guy who would have to tell these stories. And every time he sat down with me, from the time I was 5 years old to the time I think I was 56 when my father died, he was always telling me these stories. When he was dying, one of the last stories he told me was about a friend of his who was crucified in the camp in Buchenwald, and he couldn't stop himself. I remember when my daughter was 9 years old, I wondered if I should tell her the stories my father told me. And I decided I couldn't tell her the stories my father told me. They were just too terrible.
And then I remember reading that you had your mother didn't tell you those stories. And then when she was dying, then she said, let me tell you, you heard it from your father. Now let me tell you how it really was.
It was, that was interesting. She didn't, I would ask her to tell me, what had happened in the camp. And the only thing my mother would say for decades was, if they give you food, eat it. If they beat you, run away. And that's what she would say. And but when I started writing poems about this, and I started getting poems published about my parents' experiences, and when I gave my mother, I had a book published in Poland in 2002, and it was a book of my poems about my parents. And when I showed her this book, this Polish book with these poems in it, it changed everything. And I think she realized that other people were hearing the stories. And I remember her telling me one time that when I give a poetry reading, I should always tell people that she and my father were not the only two people in the camps, that there were other people in the camps, and that the stories I was telling were the stories of other people also. Yeah. But and when she started telling stories, she just went on and on telling stories. And I'll just say one more thing about that. I was 57, 58 years old when this was going on. And she started telling me a story one time. And I sensed by looking at her that it was going to be the worst story I've ever heard in my entire life about what had happened in the camps and what had happened to her. And I said to her, I couldn't hear this. I couldn't listen to the story because it was just going to be such a terrible story that I stopped her. And she said, you're still a baby. And she said, I'm not going to tell you the story.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that. And you did bring you did do what your parents have said. You did make us feel that there were a lot of people in the camp. The way you ended that poem with, and so did all the other men, about eating the pebbles. We have a question that's come in for Angela. Do you have poems on what women in the military experience today? Does military engagement transform them?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I do have some poems about that. But I think the other part of the question, I think how we experience something has so much to do with how we are, who we are when we go into it. And then its effect on us has to do with that as well. You know, I was fractured when I went into military school, became more fractured when I went into the Air Force. And it took me, I guess, until I was 42 to find all my fractured pieces and begin to put them back together. And I'm still surprised when I find another fracture. So I do have poems about that. I have a poem about Vanessa Gann and what happened with her. That's probably the one that comes to mind the most. And so I'm not sure if that was a good answer or not, but that's the one.
I see that we have a question from Kate for John. Have you been able to read in the public high schools to bring the truth of this time to this generation? She's talking about all of the concentration camps and work camps that existed throughout Germany and Poland, not just the ones that we are familiar with.
Oh. Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I've given a lot of readings at high schools. And most of the readings were before the pandemic. I haven't been in-person reading in 2 years, but I typically do about a half dozen readings a year in high schools in Virginia, and I lived in Georgia before that, and it was the same thing in Georgia. I think people are interested in having their students, their high school students, hear these stories. Yeah, and I think I'm doing a reading at Randolph College next week to one of the history classes there. It'll be my first in person in a year and a half. Yeah.
Thank you, John. That's great. We have a question for Usha. Margot would like to know, what are you doing with the poetry caravan these days? Are you working in underserved communities right now, and where?
Thank you, Margot, for that question. As you know, we started the Poetry Caravan back in 2003 in the Greenberg and White Plains area. And it continues as a collective after I left. And I believe maybe 1,000, over 1,200 free readings have gone to underserved communities like women's shelters, senior homes, hospitals, and so on. When I moved to Austin, I did start an Austin chapter, and we ran that for a year. And then I got sidetracked with my studies, and I actually launched Matwala, which was, I started that in 2015 with Pramila, who's also here. And our aim and mission was to increase the visibility of South Asian poets. And that became a very, very kind of a very driving kind of mission. And I was not able to continue with the Poetry Caravan in Austin, but Matwala is going strong. And I'm sharing the website here if all of you would like to take a look. One of the things we're really proud of is our Poets of Color reading we launched this year, which will continue into next year. And this was to show our solidarity with BLM. So please look out for our reading with Native American poets in December. We've hosted African American and Mexican. And next year we'll have South and Central American, Dalit, and Asian American poets next year. So we're really proud of that initiative to show our solidarity, that we're really all working towards the same things.
That's really wonderful, Usha. Thank you for sharing that and sharing the website with us so we can look out for those readings. We have another question for you. You bring together seamlessly in images of pain and beauty. Does this blending happen naturally, or do you consciously do this?
I think it's the nature of life and poetry to bring the opposites together, consciously or unconsciously. I think it's like the paradox I talked about right in the beginning. We cannot think of binaries without each other. So anything spoken of inherently evokes the opposite. And I think it happens with my writing process too, as a poet. Without the mirror image, we can never answer for one thing completely. We need the reflection to speak about the image. So.
Thank you, Usha. We have another question for Angela. Lynn McGee wants to say, naturally, we focus on how the military has affected women, but how have women changed the culture of the military? Does having women like Debbie James, Secretary of the Air Force, signal cultural change? And how have women changed, and how women have changed the military? Or is that just a naive take on it? She wants to know what you think about that.
I should probably tell y'all I'm not the expert on women or the military, but I do think that women having the capacity to get to have those positions, that in itself is a change. But the truth of what I think about humanity is that our work will never be done looking at our own intentions and the way we walk into every room and the way we speak to every person, every word we use, every word we capitalize, every word we don't. So I think there are some things that are better maybe than they were at one time, but I think our work as humans, as long as we're on this earth, is never done.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions. Just the way that we had a question for Usha about her imagery. Sophia wants to know from John. John, have you ever struggled to find poetic language to describe these atrocities that your parents related to you?
I have to say that I've never struggled with it. For me, most of it is memory. I remember what my father told me, what my mother told me, and that's where the poems come from these stories. For me, the best parts of these poems are the parts where I remember the stories that my parents told me, remember the images that my parents used and the way they describe things.
It's really powerful, even to the details of the blue dress with the daisies that your mother was wearing. I just couldn't believe that detail the first time I read that poem. And I think that the fact that they're just so stark, they're just so grounded in reality and the detail, makes them, so completely powerful. It's like you're not trying to be overtly poetic in them. It's the brutality of it would, I think, fight against anything that really had any kind of beauty in it. But really, all of you, the three of you, such powerful work tonight, so different, but yet so many of the themes of, equity and obviously hatred, war, just very powerful. And I'm glad you read us the umbrella poem, Usha. We needed to have some uplifting moment in the evening. But thank you all for being here and for being such a wonderful audience. And we're going to save the chat because I want to send it to all three poets so that you can, if you haven't gotten a chance to read all of the comments, a lot of people were so struck by some of the lines, they were repeating them in the chat back to you. Just a lot of praise for the power, the courage, and the strength of all of these poems. And thank you for being here with us tonight. Please don't forget to tune in on Sunday for a rare Sunday reading at 4:00 with Kathy Ossup and Amanda Moore and Jordan Franklin. We hope you return for that. And we have, for those of you who love prose, we have a prose reading on December 1st, which is another Wednesday. So we hope that you'll join us for that as well. Thank you to Susanna Case for being such a wonderful introducer of these poets tonight. Thank you all to the Soppering Hall Press Advisory Committee for being here with us tonight, and the other members and students who were here. It was wonderful to have you. And don't forget that we've recorded this. So if you know anyone who really should have this poetry in their lives, please send them the link when it goes live tomorrow, when Sophia puts it up on our YouTube channel. Thank you all. Thank you to the poets. Thank you to the audience. It was wonderful to be with you all tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Take
John,
care,
Angela.
everyone. Stay in touch.
Yes. Thank you, Jennifer, and everyone. Bye.
Bye.